I debated whether or not I wanted to continue talking about the Dreamcast, since I already created a video, but it would not be the complete story with me and the Dreamcast. There's a little bit more to it than that, and this is in regards to my personal experience with Sega's discontinuation of the Dreamcast and thus them ending their console business. Where to begin? I guess it starts with the PS2. As I've told you in the previous video, that was on everyone's mind leading up to the launch of the Dreamcast. And even post Dreamcast, there were some guys I knew in school that were spurned by Sega, either because they bought a Sega CD and didn't like it, because they got a Sega Saturn or didn't like it, or because they got a 32X and felt cheated out of it. Me personally, I never felt that way. I've gotten the 32X and was happy with it. I wanted to get a Saturn, never got a Saturn, was given a PlayStation instead. So my experience with Sega was way different from the average game player. So a lot of those guys, they either already given up or were waiting to see what was down the pike. However, things changed drastically when the PS2 came out. It was all everyone would talk about, no joke. These weird rumors started to come out saying how much more powerful the PlayStation 2 was, that it could do Pixar quality graphics, that had like Dolby Digital 5.1 surround sound, 75 million polygons a second. Well, that part was true. But you know what I mean. People were talking it up again and again and again and again. But the thing was, the games weren't there. I'll be honest. The games just weren't there. And that's not to say that there were only bad games on the PS2's launch. The only thing I could remember that stood out to me was Armored Core and Ridge Racer 5. And as much as I like the Armored Core and Ridge Racer series, those games didn't look that much better than what was already available on Dreamcast. Not to mention, the lack of anti-aliasing really hurts the image. Now, this is coming from a guy that had his Dreamcast connected to a VGA screen around this time. So I guess I'm being a little unfair in that aspect. But honestly, if you compare the quality of games that were available around the PlayStation 2 launch to what Sega already had, I found the PS2 being a really hard buy. But regardless what I said, it didn't matter because everyone at school was still talking about it like it was like the second coming of Christ or something. Regardless, I just kind of put the PS2 to the side and just basically focused on my Dreamcast and the kind of games I was enjoying. Because at that time, all it came down to was the kind of games that were available. And seeing what the PlayStation had and what the Dreamcast had, I was like, yeah, the Dreamcast is going to stick around for a while. They have the better games. It'll be okay. But I was wrong. I was dead wrong. You see, you guys got to excuse me because I remember the moment when I found out about this. In January 31st, 2001, Peter Moore announced to the world that Sega's going to discontinue the Dreamcast and start going third party. I didn't find out about this until a few days later. I even remember this moment. I was playing the Dreamcast game as I found out about this. You see, my brother's friend, he had the internet. He was checking up websites. He found out about this information and relayed it to my brother. My brother then walked through the door kind of in mad rush and just told me what he just heard. And I didn't believe it. I'll be honest, I did not believe it. I was like, Sega? Sega going third party? Sega stopping the Dreamcast? I've only had the console for maybe 8-9 months at this point. So to me it was fairly new. But hearing that, I was like, no, it's impossible. He's just joking with me. he's playing a prank. Yeah, that ain't real. Sega's been making consoles forever. They made the Master System. They made the Genesis. They made the Sega Saturn. Sega's gonna keep going. This is a fake. This is not real. It can't be real. And that was my mindset for a while. I really did think that my brother was playing a prank on me. But as time went on, and the kids at school were talking about it, permeating, I refused to believe it. Even though the gamer kids at school were talking about what happened to Sega, the announcement, I still refused to believe it. I thought it was like some sort of miscommunication, that maybe Sega would bring out some games, because in the past Sega did release some of their games on other consoles in a way. There was Afterburner on the PC Engine, there was Shinobi on the NES, there was a Sonic game on the Neo Geo Pocket. So I thought it was like one of those situations. But what finally convinced me, and this was probably the biggest blow to me as a Sega fan, was when the magazines started to report on it. Everything was all confirmed for me when I started reading the cover story on the April 2001 issue of EGM, titled Sega, Dead or Alive. That was a painful read. I'm not lying. That was a tough read. It basically stated that Sega just didn't sell enough Dreamcast, and that they were going third party. Just exactly the way my brother told me. The other magazines basically had the same news, the same cover story, but with their own take. And they would mention this or frame this as something good, that it's good that Sega went third party. Now everyone could play their games. I didn't see it that way. To me, I saw it as me missing out on some of my favorite properties. Because to be honest, I was still in high school. I didn't get a lot of money. Sure, I had like an allowance and the odd job here and there, but I wasn't getting a paycheck to paycheck kind of thing. I was still a kid. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, where I'm gonna go? Like, am I, where is Streets of Rage gonna go? Where is Sonic gonna go? Where is Virtua Fighter gonna go? Is there gonna be a new Afterburner? Is it gonna appear on the new Xbox or the new GameCube? How am I gonna get to play those? I really was, confused and upset over this, because, as I mentioned before, the Dreamcast was relatively new to me, and have it cut support right away seemed like pretty unfair. Now, granted, the silver lining was that there would be 1 year left of game releases. So to kind of put my mind out of what was going on, out of the situation, I just pretty much focused on the last year. I was like, if Sega's gonna end it here, I'm gonna give them as much support as I can. And I was basically looking down the list of all the releases that were due out around that time. Games such as Project Justice, Cannon Spike, Sonic Adventure 2. Those were the games that pretty much defined that year. However, the most bittersweet one out of those three games would have to be Sonic Adventure 2. The reason why is because that was the last time that Sonic would ever make an appearance on a Sega console. It was his 10th anniversary. The gameplay was much more refined. Could have made do with all the extra characters, to be honest. But it was an excellent game, and it made me want to play that game to its fullest. I heard down the line that there was a hidden level included if you were to get all of the emblems, and that it was Green Hill Zone. And I remember that summer, after it was released, after I'd beaten the game several times, that I decided to go ahead and fully complete this game. We're talking about raising the chow, beating every level like 5 times over on various difficulty settings and conditions. It was quite a chore, to be honest, but I felt satisfied in the end because I did it. I 100%ed that game, and when I finally got to play Green Hill Zone, it was extremely bittersweet because that was the last time that Green Hill Zone would be played on the Sega system. And when I heard that song start, it just brought back memories of when I played the first Sonic on the Sega Genesis, and now I'm there as a 17-year-old teenager just looking at this thing, realizing that I just basically grew up with the franchise and that it was going to end right then and there. It was going to end on the Dreamcast. As the year went on, we weren't getting the releases I thought that we were going to get. Games were being canceled. The magazines were covering less and less Dreamcast games. And I think the one that stung the worst would be Capcom support literally going away. One of my most anticipated games that I wanted to play was Capcom vs. SNK 2. I've seen this game in arcades, and my local mom and pop game stores had Japanese copies for sale. However, I did not have a Japanese unit, so I was eagerly waiting for an American release. However, it was all said and done when the PlayStation 2 version came out, but there was no Dreamcast version. I was pretty upset about that, but at that point I just kind of was reading the writing on the wall that it was practically over, that Capcom already saw that there was no purpose, there was no profit in making a US Dreamcast release of CVS 2. And that really bummed me out. I was really looking forward to this game, and not having the ability to play it at home really frustrated me. The neat consolation, though, was the fact that Garo Mark of the Wolves was actually released on that system, and that was a pleasant surprise, to be honest. I was unaware that the Fatal Fury series was still going on, and seeing that game kind of lessened the blow a little bit. But all honestly, I really did want to play CVS 2. From late 2001 to early 2002, a lot of the stuff that was being put up on the release calendar were mostly sports games and nothing that's really standing out. I could see that was basically the end of the Dreamcast. No new games were going to come out, and whenever I would go to a retail store like a Target or a Walmart, some of the stuff was being put on clearance. I myself managed to snag Soul Reaver for a measly $10, Resident Evil 2 and 3 for around $13 or $14 each. And I was grateful to have those games, but honestly, it was kind of saddening seeing the state that the Dreamcast was in. At that point, after getting RE2, I realized that, yeah, it's pretty much over for the Dreamcast. However, things were different in Japan. The Dreamcast was still seeing releases here and there, and I wouldn't find out about this until further down the line. Now, I knew that my American Dreamcast was capable of playing Japanese games, but I never really made an effort to start importing games from Japan until my brother's friend told me that King of Fighters 2002 was going to have a Dreamcast release. Now, as a fan of SNK, King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, Terry, Mai, Andy, all those guys, I couldn't pass up the chance. I decided to go ahead and import this game. And that was my first import game. That was the very first Japanese game I've ever imported. And I had a lot of fun. To me, it seemed like it wasn't over for the Dreamcast. It was still going on. Why am I sulking all of a sudden? There's still games out there that I could get. So I began a slight quest into getting Japanese Dreamcast games. The next game I imported was CVS 2, and this was arcade perfect. I could roll cancel on this. On a side note, I've already bought the Xbox version of this by that point, and was kind of disappointed I couldn't roll cancel. but I could roll cancel now on the Dreamcast version. So yeah, and I guess I could just go on and name all of my import games. But honestly, it felt like the Dreamcast had like a second life through the import market. And before long, I started noticing homebrew stuff, fan games making their way over. You know, with like games like Flashback, Out of This World, Ports of Breakers, Androdunos. And I look around now and I'm like, this thing is still going on. And seeing that makes me realize that as long as there's fans out there that love the system, love its games, and just have like fond memories of it, it could never really go away. And there you have it, guys. 2001, the last year that the Dreamcast saw any support. That was a tough year, I'm not gonna lie. Finding out that your most favorite console of all time, a console that you only had for a couple of months, was not gonna see any games in about a year. Yeah, it was shocking and kind of sad at the same time. Whoa. Don't want to get into the camera. But honestly, I didn't know what to do. I was frustrated. I'm not the kind of guy that had money to buy consoles left and right. And hearing that all these different Sega properties were going to go to like the GameCube, the PS2, and the Xbox made me realize that I was going to miss out on Sega games. You know, Virtua Fighter 4 going on the PlayStation 2. You know, the next Jack Ryan radio was going to go on the Xbox. Sonic was going to go to the GameCube. All my favorite properties were being split up, and you know, it was really sad seeing it go that way. But the silver lining that I saw when I got King of Fighters 2002 was that I still had options. Importing games was an excellent option. Like I showed you, I eventually got CVS 2. I eventually got Guilty Gear X. I got Tokyo Extreme Racer for some reason. It was only like $10. I couldn't say no to the Japanese version of that. So yeah, that was you know, importing games extended the life of the Dreamcast for me. And then the homebrew stuff started to come out. I began noticing, like, you know, Neo Geo ports on the Dreamcast, Baker's Revenge, Androdunos, seeing Flashback on there, then like seeing FX Unit Yuki. I was like, what is this? But I saw that a Dreamcast fan, you know, a fan that had more programming skills than me, were making games for this thing, and it just made me realize that the Dreamcast, in some weird small way, is still alive, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the community that is making these homebrew ports on my most favorite console of all time. And I said this in my previous video, and I'm gonna say it again because it needs to be said. Get yourself a Dreamcast. If you're the kind of gamer that loves video games, I'm pretty sure there's something on Sega's last console just waiting for you to play with. Anyway, this was Knockout 21. Please comment, rate, and subscribe. And like always, have a good one. Take care, guys.